Hi everyone, hello everyone. Sorry that we are a bit late today, but we had a couple of technical issues here at the Institute. Welcome everyone to today's session for the Digital Classicists London Summer Seminar. Today we have Dr. Valeria Vitale with us, who will be presenting a paper on Antiquities and the Machine, computational methods for the study of the representation of historical sites on Ordnance Survey maps of Great Britain. And we also have with us Kelly, Katie, and Rainer Simon. Thank you so much for being there today. As always, please feel free to leave any comments below the screen. You should be able to see a comment tab where you can leave any comments or just say hi. We always love to hear from people watching live. And this will be available on YouTube for the future. So also, please feel free to watch it later. Thank you very much. And I'm passing it to Valeria.
Thank you, Paula. So let's get started with our talk today. And what are we going to do? I'm going to talk a little bit about our project, Machines Reading Maps. I will then say only a few words about one of our corpora we're working on, which is the Ordnance Survey maps of Great Britain. I will try to explain why we chose to focus on the representation of antiquities on those maps. I will share some of our research questions, what we are trying to achieve with this work, and we'll end actually ask for help from everyone who is following today. So let's get started with the project, Machine Reading Maps, which is an international collaboration that is funded by the AHRC in the UK and the NEH in the United States, and is a project that was born to address an issue in digital cultural heritage. And the issue is that, maps are full of historical and anthropological and environmental information, and there is a great appetite for map collection to be digitized and made available. However, at the moment, it is not always that easy and straightforward to know what it is on a map. So, and that is due basically to the nature of the metadata and how maps are currently cataloged. So how can we actually make the content of the maps, in particular the text that is on the map, more visible and less opaque to both researchers, but also the general public and people who just love maps? And the idea of the project was to use a combination of machine learning and semantic technologies to process the digitized maps and detect and recognize the text, so produce a sort of transcription of the map text, the text that appears on map, so that they will become more findable, but also more searchable, in themselves. And also for the named entities, for the unique features on the map, the things that have a name, basically. Also attempt to create a link to external knowledge bases, such as OpenStreetMap or Wikidata, or maybe specialized historical gazetteers. In this way, through this automated process, we hope to create actually much, much richer metadata that actually tell us what is in the map. And I think that is, already quite exciting and quite a different way to think of, these digitized collections. But also, as humanities researchers, we became quite excited about the idea of creating a new kind of corpus from all this information that is in maps and that we want to make available to researchers for, in various disciplines. So who are the people in this project? So on the European side, we have Katie McDonough, who is in the call today and is the PI on the UK side for the project, and myself, and we're based at the Alan Turing Institute. And also playing for Europe, we have Rainer Simon also in the call, who is the developer of the semantic annotation platform. And you may know him as the developer of Recogito, and is at the Austrian Institute of Technology. And on the US side, we have Yao-Yi Chiang, who is a computer scientist that has really led the research on the application of computer vision on maps, and his PhD students, Zekun Lee and Jina Kim, and Deborah Holmes-Wong at the University of Southern California Library, where Yao-Yi and his team are based at Minnesota University. And what we're trying to do is build, a workflow to basically get the text on maps. And this workflow builds upon a model that Yao-Yi has developed, Yao-Yi and his team have developed, that is called Map Curator. And what Map Curator does is processing through a process of these digital maps, it detects the text. So it says, okay, this is a text label, or this is a piece of text on the map. It recognizes it, so it tries to kind of transcribe it, produce, a digital readable version. And again, for the unique features, also tries to connect it to an external knowledge base, as we said. However, Map Curator didn't have really a graphic user interface. And this is one of the reasons why we thought, okay, let's integrate it with the popular, well-established semantic annotation platform like Recogito. But we also asked for some customization of Recogito that we will discuss in a bit. So what we had was this sort of super platform that put together the manual semantic annotation features of Recogito and the automated features of Map Curator. And with this, let's say, combined powers, we were able, on the one hand, for example, to use the manual annotation to create gold standard data. So very accurate manual annotation done by experts that we could then use to evaluate the performance of the algorithm. We could run Map Curator, although, not to its full potential. And quite interesting for us, we were also able, through the interface, to edit the automatic annotation, the automatically generated annotations. So we were able, to edit the bounding boxes, to correct the transcription, or add the transcription, to add external links, and so on. And we created this platform, this integrated platform, honestly, just for us. It was for internal use. However, we started presenting it in a couple of workshops, and it was actually quite well received, especially, I think, this opportunity to actually interact with the automatically generated annotations of the text, to the point that this feature was, I think, one of the things that attracted the attention of a quite large and well-established and well-loved online collection of digitized maps, like the David Ramsey collection, with whom we are collaborating right now. But the manual features alone were also quite popular. And what I'm showing now is a collaboration that we had with the National Library of Scotland that asked us to use this new version of Recogito to enable volunteers to annotate an historical map of Edinburgh. And they created like thousands of annotations in less than a week. It was fantastic. It was amazing. And so our partners are the National Library of Scotland, just mentioned, the British Library, in the US, the Library of Congress, and the University of Southern California. And the corpora we're working on are the Ordnance Survey maps and the Sanborn Fire Insurance maps. And they're both amazing corpora, but for this talk, we are focusing specifically on the Ordnance Survey maps. So let's talk about the OS maps, as they are often called. They, as the name kind of gives away, they started with, quite an explicit military purpose, and they were used as an aid to suppress uprising in Scotland around 1745. So, not the best way to start, but many mapping efforts have quite a strong, colonial connotation attached. Not that subtle. And, in fact, they were also used in Northern Ireland to basically support taxation. But then, the idea that it would be useful to have a detailed, granular mapping of the entire nation actually spread, and the Irish model was then applied from the 1840s onwards through the county series to England and Wales as well. And I'm not going to get into the history of the OS maps because there are many experts about it. They are incredibly loved in this country. I'm just going to say that they are available they were produced with different scales. We're focusing mostly on the 6 inch to the mile and 25 inch to the mile. There were several editions and revisions, and they are, as I said, a very successful, very loved piece of cultural heritage, although, not uncontroversial. And, despite a little bit of a dark past, I think that they are an amazing example of how much historical information can be found in map, and, specifically in the text, in the labels that we find in the maps. So our goal, our mission was, okay, how do we make this information about the text on these historical maps available? How can we make these maps, more useful, more accessible? And of course, already producing a digitized version of, the map text, the text that is on the map. We like to call it map text. That is already a huge step forward because we can already enable, something like, basic string matching. I want to find all the maps in a collection that feature the city of Alexandria, and I can just search for it and find all the examples of Alexandria. And that, I think, it's already going way beyond of simply what it is in the metadata, which is currently in most cases what we can search when we're looking at maps. And thanks to the links to external knowledge bases, we can actually be a little bit more precise, and we can say exactly which of the many Alexandrias that there are in the world we're actually interested in. We can say, I only want to see Alexandria in Egypt. And if I've used, for example, a specialist gazetteer like the Pleiades gazetteer of the ancient world, I could even be able to say, I only want to see the maps that feature the ancient city of Alexandria specifically. And one of the great things, one of the many great things about building these connections to external lists like Wikidata or OpenStreetMap or historical gazetteers, and one of the big added values of linked open data in general is that we're not only building a bridge to that point of information. We are building a bridge to all the information about that place that is actually stored in the knowledge base. So, for example, alternative names. And if you have ever used Wikidata, looked up a place in Wikidata, you know that there are alternative names in other languages, and we can through this link enrich the map in a way that I can get results that are not that are not just literal to what I'm looking for. And through the knowledge bases, I can also get information, about location, even though, we mostly work with georeference maps anyway, but the information is there, or, administrative divisions and so on. We could even implement, things like, fuzzy search that could account for transcription mistakes or typos and things like that. And I think that this would already be amazing. This would already be a way, a big change in the way that we currently can use digitized map collections. However, the more we worked on this, the more I think, or at least I personally, became convinced that what would be the real massive game changer would be if we were able to search the features on the map by type. If we could say, I want to look for this specific kind of features on the map. I want to look at, the islands. I want to only find, the places that are smaller than 500,000 inhabitants. I only want to see historical sites, things like that. And of course, some information about types is in the knowledge bases. However, in that case, we are kind of stuck with what our knowledge base taught were interesting types. And for example, if we're using OpenStreetMap, well, maybe they're not the most useful types for humanities research, and they can also be a little bit anachronistic. But I think that what really, humanities researchers would love to have, I for sure would love to have, is the possibility to say, okay, I want to choose the types. I want to say, I want to perform this search by type according to my research needs. Now, is that possible? Sadly, no. So there isn't at the moment a machine learning model that would enable us to do that. And just to put this in context, I was chatting with Katie just a couple of days ago, and she made me realize something that usually what happens in the digital humanities is that there is a technology that has been developed for something else, for another field, usually those fields that receive more funding than the humanities do. And what humanities researchers do is they borrow it, they adapt it, they tweak it, sometimes they improve it, and then they use it for humanities research. In this case, there is nothing. There is absolutely nothing. So we're trying to experiment with something that doesn't exist yet. So we are, actually trying to get to a new kind of, piece of artificial intelligence for the humanities, which I think, it's quite exciting and fairly uncommon. But even before we go to the fact that this thing is not at the moment technologically possible, although, we are trying to get there. This is our bet. Can we actually get there? There are other problems, of course. There are always problems when you talk about types, because, well, types are at the same time very simple and very complicated thing to talk about. And to strike a balance between, types that are, flexible enough and adaptable enough that they're useful to a large number of researchers, and types that are tailored and specific enough to be actually, valuable and informative to a particular research question, a particular research project, it's very difficult. It's like the mythical beast in the digital humanities. It's a problem with linked open data. It's a problem with, ontologies, vocabularies, text encoding, schema, you name it. It's always really, really difficult to find that point. How many, what is a good number, of types? How many do we want? And even before that, if we want to take the problem, just even one step further back, are we actually saying that there are universal types that can go across, different mapping traditions, different moments in times? Are we claiming that? Can we claim that? We're not claiming that. I don't think we can. And this is not, a speculative problem, because when we work with the David Ramsey collection, that does have maps from all traditions and many points in times, that is actually a question that we have to ask ourselves. So, types are actually complicated, and we really don't have a typology that we say, okay, we're going to use this. This is going to be good for everyone. Let's stick to this. And what we learn, what we think, the place where we are now, after working on our own vocabulary, after having spoken with other projects that have developed their place-based vocabulary, we came to the idea that the only thing that we can do is think of this as a modular system. And because I'm in the process of moving houses, I'm spending a lot of time on IKEA websites, and then it struck me that what we have in mind, it's something like an IKEA wardrobe, where we have a small number of very, very simple empty modules that you can pick and choose and combine, and then you can add all your personal customization that are really specific to the kind of house that you have and the kind of wardrobe that you have. And I think that is as much as we can claim at the moment. And also thinking about types, thinking about this challenge can we actually, build an algorithm? Can we teach a machine to look at the text on the map and not only recognize the text, transcribe the text, when possible, attach it to an external knowledge base, but also be able to detect a customized type that we have defined? Is that possible? And thinking about this challenge, we had to basically realize how much information there is in maps, which, it's something that sounds self-evident, but I can tell you, I think that we don't realize. We're so used to reading maps that we don't realize how many steps our brain performs in order to understand the many layers of information that are very elegantly and very efficiently and very synthetically packed in maps. And only when you try to explain that to a machine, to formalize your processes enough that you can transform them into instructions, then you start realizing that maps are a very complex communicative object that has several codes that intersect, that interact, and the signs of maps, they play, they have different meanings, often at the same time, and they play different functions. And all that, I mean, we really got into that. We really got into, let's look at the maps as, as codes, as text, as, objects in which the various components have to be decoded. And this is one of the reasons that really informed Reiner's redesign of Recogito. And I would be very happy to talk more about the new Recogito that is specific for annotating maps, but that's not what we're talking about now. I just want to share one of the new features, one of the many new features that Reiner added, which is the opportunity to say what kind of sign you are annotating on the map. And bear with me because I'm going to get to the Antiquities in a moment. So through this new interface, for example, you can say if what you're annotating is an entity. So if it is something that actually resembles somehow the thing in real life, like, for example, the footprint of a building that has some qualities of the building. If it is a label, so if it is a piece of textual information that, it's denominating something, it's accompanying something, or if it is a symbol, if it is something that is actually completely arbitrary, that we only understand because there is an index, so like a dot, a cross, a triangle, or because of a very established cartographic convention, like, I don't know, the use of the color blue to signify the water. And what is great about this interface is that it enables us to start thinking about this information as structured data. And in a practical way, it also enables us to say the many signs on the maps actually belong to more than one category. So, for example, if you're annotating the footprint of a building that is also red, you're saying that that is an entity because it has some, let's say, geometric property of the actual building. But it's also using the color red symbolically to tell us that building is made of bricks. And the same is true for text. We're getting to the Antiquities. Because text on maps, of course, has, let's say, a literal meaning. It's telling us, maybe the place names of somewhere. But there is so much symbolic information that is attached to text as well. And we learn a lot looking at text by its size, by the thickness, by the orientation, and by font. And now we are landed on the Antiquities. So we thought, okay, to do our experiments around type, to discover if it is possible to have a machine learning model that identifies type, let's find a type that is very, very recognizable on the Ordnance Survey maps. And there may have been other reasons that went into this choice, but we thought, okay, Antiquities are perfect because they really do stand out on the maps. How do they stand out? Well, they do so visually and they do so in wording. And visually, they are very immediately recognizable because they have a dedicated font. And when I say a dedicated font, that's incorrect, because they actually have 3+1 dedicated fonts. And as you can see, we have a font for Roman antiquities between roughly 40 CT and 400 CT, prehistoric or Saxon for anything that came before Roman, Norman, that is for anything after 400-ish CT to actually 17th century CT, and we get subsequent, that is anything after 17th century. And these labels evolved a little bit through time. This is 1923, but you can see, for example, the before prehistoric was called druidical, which I think is really cool. And the font also, you know, got a little bit cleaned up, and luckily it became a little bit more readable than it was in 1847. And actually, these fonts were developed specifically for the Ordnance Survey maps. And the one for Roman antiquities, I kid you not, is called Egyptian. And the one for prehistoric and Saxon is called Old English. The one for Norman is called German. And if it were me, I would have made German text and Old English a little bit more distinct from each other. But we're not here to criticize, but we are here to say that this is actually a brilliant visual code that enables us to, you know, at a glance, see, for example, see, for example, you know, what is, you know, the history of, you know, of a place. What are the antiquities? What are, let's say, the legacy of the place? And this code is simple and straightforward, and it enables masterpieces like this one, that, you know, there are hundreds of examples like that in the Ordnance Survey map, where it says that there is, you know, a new manor house on the site of a Norman manor house. And please notice that this sentence would have absolutely no meaning without the use of the font. And this example also enables me to introduce the other thing that makes the antiquities stand out on the map, which is the wording. And on the OS, we find something that we might call today a control vocabulary to define the antiquities and to define their status. So on site of, in parentheses, means that there is, you know, a new building on top of a former building. But we have, you know, actually a very nice, compact and efficient vocabulary. For example, site of means that there was a piece of cultural heritage there that is not visible anymore. We have supposed site of, which is the same, but we are less sure that there actually was at one time a piece of cultural heritage there. There are variations on supposed site, like reputed site, which sadly got deprecated in 1921, but I thought it was nice to show. And then there are also, let's say, reserved words, if we can use this term, to identify the status of the antiquity, like things like remains of or in ruins. And we have started compiling a list of these, let's say, you know, keywords that help us spotting that, you know, the label is probably referring to an antiquity, to a piece of cultural heritage. And this is just a screenshot of actually a long list, and I'll come back later to the use of this list, why we're compiling this list and what we want to do with it. And so what I wanted to say, just to summarize, and things are going to get more complicated. So let's stop for a moment and think about how much information it's delivered just by these elements that we have looked at the moment, and how much complexity these labels, I mean, we're talking just about text on map, how much complexities these labels have added to the map. So first of all, we don't have just the visible, which is what you expect to be, you know, mapped on, you know, in the landscape when someone is making a survey of, you know, of the landscape. But we also have the invisible. We have things that used to be there, but they're not there anymore, and they still are featured on the map. And I like that. It's like saying that, you know, even if that thing is not there anymore, is somehow, you know, in the spirit of the place. It's, you know, it's a little bit like a Piranesi view of the place, and I really like that. but also how many temporal dimensions have been added to the map, because we have our 4 chronological spans. But also, if we look, at the life of some buildings, we also have, their history compressed there. Like, there was a manor house before, there is a new manor house now. So we have, that little history of the building inside the history of the map. So I think, things are getting nicely richer and richer. And so this is the other reason we actually started working on the Antiquities. They stand out visually, and we thought it was a good way to experiment with types, but they were also so extraordinary. And we just fell in love with that. There was, so many things that you don't usually find in maps. And just to put this a little bit more in context, of course, there are other maps that represent the invisible. There are other maps that represent, let's say, different chronological times. And one of the, classicists might be very familiar with is the Forma Orbis Romae by Lanciani, in which, on the map, it is possible to see the footprints of monumental buildings in Rome that don't exist anymore in Roman times, in medieval times. And Lanciani uses, a complete different visual code, which is also brilliant, also very effective. It uses color, it uses thickness, and we all love the Forma Orbis Romae. But what struck me in the comparison between these two maps is that Lanciani is actually targeting experts. So the Forma Orbis Romae is for classicists, is for archaeologists, is for people who are specifically looking at these ghost buildings in Rome, while the Ordnance Survey maps are targeting the general public, and yet they have so much and such rich information about antiquities, even about findspots. And that really struck me. Why there is it's amazing, there is information about things that have been found on the Ordnance Survey maps. Even we found a skeleton there. I'm not joking, you can see there, you can actually find things like a skeleton was found here, a coin hoard was found here, some pottery shards were found here. And this level of granularity of the information, got us thinking, okay, there is no way that the surveyors actually knew about that. So this knowledge must come from somewhere else. And we found some answers in the beautiful guidelines for the archaeology in the field that was published in 1921. And the advice is talk to the locals, because they actually know this stuff. They know about the mounds, they know about the barrows, they know about, the Roman pottery that was, excavated and then, covered up again. And another advice that is given is to look at printed sources, especially those that have maps and that, have, maybe other surveys that can then make their way into the Ordnance Survey maps. So, again, let's unpack this. Do you see that the provenance of the information is also getting really complex? We're not talking anymore about things that the surveyors knew or could see. We're talking about community knowledge that made its way into the map, and academic knowledge that also made its way into the map. And I think it's time now to give credit to this amazing individual that was O.J.S. Crawford, who was the first OS archaeological officer starting in 1920, the author of those amazing guidelines, and is, no surprise that he was a pioneer in scientific archaeology. And I can imagine that sometimes he had a really hard time trying to, teach the surveyors to recognize archaeological, features in the landscape, but we are very glad that at least he tried. And I'm also very glad to say that among the books that he said, were absolutely to be read and to be looked at, there is at least one that was authored by a woman archaeologist, which was La Sofia Armitage, that is cited as, the seminal knowledge about Norman castles. So about findspots, again, let me say one more thing about findspots. I find that amazing because, I mean, they're not even places. They are things that happen. So we have labels on the map. They're not even about places. They're about something that happened. They're about an event. And if you think about it, they also add one more chronological layer because we're not talking just about, the fact that there were Romans here. We're talking about the fact that, in 1844, there was an excavation going on. So we have another moment in time that is captured on the map just through this, very synthetic, very compact use of text. And I just want to, show you this, detail of the Ordnance Survey map that I found by chance. I don't even know where this place is, but it struck me that, there are examples of antiquities from all the time periods, and there are, things that are in ruins, and there are, things that, have disappeared, and there are informations about the excavations. It says Roman foundations found in 1844. And please notice that the font used to say that the Roman foundation was found is not the font for Roman antiquities, because we're not talking about the Roman antiquities. We're talking about the moment in time that is the excavation, which is why, consistently, it is using the font for, subsequent, anything that happened after the 17th century. Now, I hope that you are all absolutely hyped about the representation of antiquities on maps. So what are we going to do with that? Well, we want to use this case study to see if we can actually teach a machine to learn to recognize a bespoke typology of text on maps. But while we're doing so, why not also, investigate it from a humanities perspective? So because it's not possible at the moment to actually run, a ready-made machine learning algorithm to get all the antiquities from the OS maps, what we're going to do is select some areas, run map curator, and get all text labels, antiquities and not antiquities, all of it. Now, how do we separate the antiquities from the not antiquities? We will use natural language processing, and we will use that list that I showed before. So we will try to use those keywords to sort of, spot possible references to the antiquities. It won't be perfect, but we will get, some kind of data set. What we will do with that data set, we will compare it with external sources, either historical or contemporary archaeological data sets, like, for example, the one in the Archaeology Data Service, English Heritage, CAMMORE, and we're happy to hear more suggestions about that. And we will compare the labels and the locations. What we're looking for, what do we want to see in these comparisons? Do these places still exist? And if they have disappeared, why do they have done so? I mean, have they been destroyed, or they're not considered relevant anymore? Are they called in the same way, or has the label changed? And are they interpreted in the same way? Or they used to be known as a Roman camp, but now we know that they are a religious temple. Are there obvious omissions, things that should have been on the map and they were well known, but they didn't make their way into the map? And what kind of questions do we want to answer with that? Well, I mean, we're very open to suggestions, but what we are focusing on at the moment, besides, of course, our technological goal, is can we use these labels and the comparison between these labels to trace some kind of official or unofficial narratives around cultural heritage? And can we learn something about the reception of that cultural heritage? For example, did the love for, of Victorians for ruins played any role in the fact that, every single ruined castle is represented on the OS maps? And can we use the change of these labels, things like druidical disappearing, or, adjectives like antediluvian or biblical disappearing, to trace a shift into the history of archaeology? Can we do that? Would that be useful? And here is where I'm actually asking you for help. So people who are following online, people in the room, if you have suggestions, we are very happy to hear them. What we're looking for are, can you help us finding interesting areas? Can you help us finding areas where you know that some kind of reinterpretation or subsequent excavations went on? Can you tell us about other external data sets that we could use for comparison? I mean, of course, the ADS is very rich and has a lot of stuff, but if you know of, a fantastic, historical data set that we should definitely look at, please let us know. And if you have, other, research questions that, we didn't think of, we would be very, very happy to hear about that. And now, maybe super quickly, I want to show, I mean, we started asking actually people if they could help us. And some people, very kindly obliged. I would like to thank Amara Thornton and Katherine Harlow from the ICS, and also the amazing Chris Fleet at the National Library of Scotland, without whom we wouldn't be doing this project at all. And he did send us a couple of examples that I'm happy to share, and examples of sites that have been reinterpreted, which is, the kind of things that we're trying to spot to identify the best area. And this is an example of Cairn Papel that used to be known as, let's say, a medieval fort, what would be labeled as Norman, but subsequent excavations revealed that it was actually, a Neolithic monument and henge monument. So you see that it has changed. By the way, if you have never played with the comparison feature between maps on the NLS website, please do that, because it is an incredible amount of fun. And this is another example of a place that is very hard to pronounce. It's Jarshov, I believe, that, I mean, again, it used to be known as 16th century mansion, but then a natural erosion revealed that it was a much older site, and we don't have the digitized corresponding OS maps, but it is now labeled as, a prehistoric. I mean, I don't think they use prehistoric anymore, but as a Neolithic monument. And this is, something that I stumbled upon just by chance. And you see on the left, we have the 6-inch from the, beginning of the 20th century. And among the various, ruins, there is remains of a cross, the remains of a medieval cross. And the cross is not there anymore in the 25-inch to the mile, which should be a much more granular map, actually, in the period, in a subsequent period. So what happened to the cross? Has that been destroyed? Or, did they actually decide that they didn't need to map every single, ruined cross? So these are the kind of examples that we're looking at. And if if you went on a holiday like Chris did, and and thought of us and sent us this message like, oh, I'm actually in a place that I've been reinterpreted, we would be really happy to hear about that. And I think that I may have spoken for too long, and I can now, please, if you want more information about the project, here is our website and our Twitter account. And shall I?
Okay, great. Thank you. Here?
Yeah.
Cool. Great. Thank you so much. That was wonderful and very, very fascinating. Should we start by asking people in the room if they may have any questions? Thank you very much for coming and being able to come even with the strike and everything.
Yeah, special thanks to the people who came here, with the strike.
Oh, okay. Right, Christopher Sperry Green. I've spent 50 years probably looking at maps. Many things to pick up there. But one point I will raise in connection with the map of Bath. I've never seen that map before, but it had the word basilica within the outline of Bath Cathedral. That is a theory of the day when the map was being made. I think would not be accepted now. There's major structures under them, but they've been reinterpreted.
I didn't spot that. Thank you. Yes, that's the kind of things they were looking for. Yeah.
At first, I thought it said the temple of Minerva as well. Then I realised the MI was not quite. It is the temple of Minerva, so they got that right. Yes, and that's still accepted. Yes. The choice of features in the landscape, the Roman skeleton or that's a little bit random. It's what sort of came to mind, I think, when they were mapping in the area. It's not comprehensive. So in the next, go to the next parish, and it'll be a villa, it won't be on the map. But yes, there's interesting issues there.
Yeah, it is sadly less consistent than one would hope. But we try to gather all the variations, and we were actually quite interested in those variations, and how do they change through time and things like that. Thank you.
I was wondering, are you also comparing? Oh, sorry, introduce myself. I'm Iris Kramer. I developed AI in my PhD to automatically detect archaeology on LiDAR and satellite images. Nice. So it's super related, and now I've started a company where we use this for commercial archaeology, but also I've tried a bit with digitizing historic maps, and so it's really been great to see the work that you've been doing. I've been following it along, and I think it's amazing. So. But I was wondering, are you also comparing those locations then to the current day, what the OS still maps today in their POI data sets or something? I think that's where they store some of the archaeology remains. It would be interesting to see what they then today use in their terms.
There are other team members in the call, so maybe Katie or Rainer want to say something. I believe the OS dataset is not open, but maybe Katie, do you want to say something about that?
Yeah, no, we will. The OS open data that we have, that we can have access to, right, that will have the information about the modern labels, is definitely an external data set to compare to the ADS kind of disciplinary specific information. And oh, is there an echo? Is it okay? Okay. So yes, that's something that's really very much part of the plan, and I think that for us in particular, it's being able to understand, how these mapping practices have changed over time, and how that relates to how sort of, as Valeria has mentioned, the kind of disciplinary developments over time as well. So you have kind of two kind of professionalizations happening alongside each other, cartographic and archaeological. And of course, throughout these periods, they're very much intertwined. So that's been a really exciting thing to think about.
Great. Maybe another suggestion for the data sets that you are using for finding archaeology. There is a website called Heritage Gateway, and they combine a lot of local authority data and historic England data, the National Trust, they all put lots of locations of archaeological sites there, so that might be useful.
Yeah, no, thank you. That's I now remember that I came across that for another project, and that's a great suggestion. Thank you. Yeah.
Okay. Hi, I'm Andrea Balletto, working in King's College London, and I'm interested in GIS and applications of GIS in digital humanities, so this is super interesting. As Valeria said, it's an amazingly difficult problem to extract information from those historic maps. And I was curious about the level of accuracy you can reach on text recognition, because normally text recognition is done against a white page, so doing it on top of other objects and symbols must looks incredibly difficult. And the other question was about whether you try to do semantic segmentation of the map, meaning extracting objects and not only text, because I think that's a really interesting problem where you can actually improve the semantic segmentation knowing what labels are there, and obviously matching the different objects with labels is a very interesting problem.
Yeah, sure. And I mean, again, maybe I can start with this and then hand it over to whoever wants to take this further. I don't know if Rainer also wants to jump into the conversation. I don't know if Katie has more precise data about the accuracy. I know that the training is aided by the use of synthetic maps that are generated also using the OSM locations. So basically there are these synthetic maps generated with the known locations that will aid the training of the algorithm. And that has improved the, let's say, the accuracy. Although I don't know if Katie wants to say something more about, I don't know if we do have an actual percentage of performance.
Yeah, we haven't run the pipeline on, I would say, enough OS maps to give a kind of, yeah, where I don't have like an F1 score to report to you today, but generally on the maps that the kind of previously Yao-Yi has tested the USGS topographic maps. It's in the range of in terms of the task of the actually transcribing the text, right? So the kind of combination of drawing a bounding box around the text and actually accurately identifying the characters is about between 50 and 60%. So there's obviously a huge amount of room for improvement here. And the issues that are very much open questions are obviously things like words that have characters with large spacing between them, things that are actually phrases, right? Words that need to be connected, curvature, as Valeria has highlighted, all of the different fonts that can appear on one map. And of course, the fact that most maps in the world are not actually part of a large series collection. And so the kind of next phase of our work is really trying to embrace that challenge of how can we create models that work with sort of quite groupings of stylistically similar cartographic materials, where we're not trying to build, a model per map. That is a very inefficient and not inappropriate solution to this challenge, but to develop some models that will work on as many maps as we can get a decent accuracy for. And of course, this question of accuracy is the really big question. What will be accurate enough will depend on the research question that you have. And so that's really the space that we're operating in and testing out research questions like this one to do with archaeological information and fonts, and really thinking through how well the computer vision models are performing for the different tasks that have to happen along the line to get us to the endpoint. Rainer, do you want to add anything there about about our gold standard data and just the role that manual annotation plays in this, or anything else?
Yeah, not really. I mean, one thing which I wanted to add is, and I hope I'm not, so Yao-Yi isn't here, so I hope I'm not giving the wrong.
Please do, yeah.
But Map Curator isn't like just one model. It's more like a collection of different models, and it's also still developing. So we are currently also in the process of evaluating different kind of base models and strategies, which have different disadvantages and advantages. So there are parts of the model that are better at identifying the place where a toponym is on the map. There are others that are better in transcribing. There are others that are better in identifying like curved text and things like that. So I think it's going to stay more like a toolbox in the future, and you need to pick the right tools depending on the map. So that's, basically reiterating also what Katie said. You need to tune this towards the map that you have.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. We also have a few comments on the chat. Some people really interested in the text recognition applied to maps and thought
the fonts were really useful, and we even got.
Hi Victor, we met Victor in Cyprus. Hi Victor, it's really nice to find you on the seminar.
Thank you, Victor. And we also had a couple of comments from the famous Charlotte Boucher, who
The one and only.
local histories might be an interesting source if you haven't looked at it yet. And she also had a question. I wonder if you could run a comparison with the Victoria County histories, which are very locally based.
Yeah, that was on our radar. I think that Amara suggested it, and I really like that suggestion. I think that as soon as we identify some areas that we want to sample, then we will look for the, let's say, corresponding local archives, but we will definitely look into the Victoria County histories. I wasn't familiar with that resource, but yeah, I think that, yeah, Amara suggested it, so thanks. And also I was struck by, this sort of crowdsourced local history component that emerged in the maps. I would be really, really interested in, finding ways to bring that up.
Katie, what do you think?
I was just going to say that I think there's a sort of an opportunity definitely to work with the Victoria County histories, because many of them have been turned into structured data by for British History Online, and so they're going to be kind of low-hanging fruit in terms of being able to search for text, and it's great to be reminded because they're really, really valuable. Yeah.
Great. Finally, Kelly.
Yeah, no, thank you for this fantastic presentation, and you guys are doing very exciting work. So I'm first of all just very grateful to be here to meet you all, because I enjoyed reading a few of your papers in preparation for today and just getting up to speed on all of this. So for background, I model archaeological sites, so this is completely outside my normal range of specialization, but it was really lovely to hear the paper. Just a couple of questions. So I'm wondering, when we think about knowledge representation from these maps, and I realize this is a slightly unfair question because it's not the purpose of your project, but I'm wondering what extension or future work you maybe foresee to capturing the visual features, which are very much representing interesting things that are going on topographically. You brought up Lanciani, Valeria, so I can't not ask this question. So I was just curious how you see maybe that representation in the data set that you have already, but then also as a future extension of the work, how you envision incorporating those.
I can take us. Do you want to start, Valeria?
No,
I'll just, and because I also just realized that we didn't answer Andrea's question about image segmentation, and so this is a perfect opportunity to thank you for that reminder in a sense. So yeah, effectively being able to connect the text to the object that or area that it's representing on the map is kind of the holy grail here. And Yao-Yi has done some work on that in the past, sort of in a sense. The last few years of his research are really kind of taking these discrete problems, right, and working on them sort of individually. Before, definitely, I know he's keen, and we are all keen to bring these different kinds of information together. It's not going to happen tomorrow. It's very difficult, but it's definitely something that we're interested in. I think as humanists approaching these maps, we also have to be aware of the challenges of trying to impose a bit too much precision on the content, and so things like attaching text labels to objects and having vector data for like building footprints and things like that makes a lot of sense for potentially for things like the OS maps that were very accurately surveyed and for which we have a quite high confidence in even once we georeference the map, if that's done with very high quality, then we can sort of think of that as reliable historical data in terms of its position and it's reflecting the truth of what was on the ground. But we really can't make those assumptions, even for OS maps all the time. There's a lot of active stuff that was put on the maps. And so there is this, I do have this hesitation around the vectorization of everything on a historical map. And so I think one of the really interesting areas of research going forward will be some more critical thinking about how we do that. If we're doing it, what is the best way to do that, and to kind of approach this with a critical framework.
Yeah, because I think that brings up a really interesting question, which Valeria, you gave a couple examples of this where those ideas have been revised. And I know you guys are looking for case studies into this, but there's a very real possibility that scholarship has moved past the identification of this area as a Roman cemetery. I don't know, because I don't know where we're looking at, right? But it would be interesting to sort of think about through your project how that data has evolved and continues to evolve, because we may change our minds yet again. And so it's just quite interesting. I think you've got so many ideas intersecting your project. One last question, and then I'll move on. But I wonder what you envision in terms of the future extensions of this work. So you've mentioned a lot of different possibilities. So how are you prioritizing those? What do you view as maybe the next 5 years? And then obviously this could expand much further.
I don't know if Reiner wants to say anything about his other new project, which is related, but maybe he doesn't.
Pardon? You mean the Italian?
Yeah.
So I mean, I can only speak about technical head-on. So I'm not a digital humanist. I'm a tool builder essentially. So there is one project where we are looking into. It's not semantic segmentation, but it's at least like vectorization of certain features. So we are looking into vectorization of cadastral boundaries, for example. And I could see this very usefully applied also for things like extracting building footprints, for example. So that's definitely a direction we are looking for, and there's already kind of follow-up projects on the horizon. Maybe in terms of the semantic typing, there's also some more work coming up in machines reading maps. If you want to say
I mean, I think that Kelly, your first question kind of hit the nail on the head. Is right. It's really trying to think about how are we looking to the future in which we'll be bringing together different kinds of information that are present on maps, linking them with other data sets, whether that's knowledge bases or gazetteers, or just other kinds of historical data. So, for example, in my other project in Living with Machines, we're combining some information that we've generated about the visual content of maps, which isn't vector data, but is information about sort of patch level information about the nature of visual information on the maps, and linking that with census microdata, as well as some other geolocated historical data sets. So the opportunity is really in thinking, as people working in the spatial humanities, about how we're linking across data sets and across projects, and doing so in a way that opens up opportunities for more researchers to use this work, and for it to not just kind of sit on the shelf once we're done with this particular project.
Yeah, that's very exciting. And I enjoyed reading that paper, by the way. That was the one that I read. So congrats on a lovely paper. So thank you guys for the answers to the questions and for the paper.
Another question coming from the room.
Yeah, hi. This is a very minor question, but it's been bugging me since it was like one of the first or second things you said at the very beginning, and I'm still trying to get it. This is very much about how the makers of these maps saw the world and saw history. And what I'm really fascinated by is the fact that in the various fonts that they use to represent different history, they have a font for both pre-Roman and post-Roman, and it's the same font. So are they picturing the world as everything pre-medieval was this mess, except for the Romans, which we understand and recognize? But if it was post-Roman or pre-Roman, no idea. Is that how they see the world?
Well, I mean, we can only speculate, but these are the kind of questions that we are asking. Like, what is let's say, sort of the accidental meaning that was, transferred into these maps. Things that, they were not even meant to be explicit, but that become explicit today when we look at that. We did think a lot about. We started thinking, because there is a lot to talk about, the role of, the centrality that Roman archaeology seems to receive in that time. I mean, was that, part of some, imperial dream? Was that a way to say, I don't know, Scottish people are a bit wild because they didn't get the Romans? I mean, what was there a narrative? I mean, why are, they so prominent? But I mean, for example, I find it odd that, there is, one font that covers something like, 13th centuries. And then there is, a very specific one for 4. So while, I mean, I would have expected, people in Great Britain to wanting, I don't know, a specific font for medieval and maybe, another font for, early modern, but they didn't bother about that. So we are actually, asking these historical questions on top of the cartographic, on top of, the archaeological. So these questions about receptions, about how cultural heritage was consumed and used, in a way. The answer is we don't know, but we hope to gain more knowledge about it. I don't know if Katie wanted to say something else about this topic. I mean, she's our historian. So.
Yes, but you're the classicist. I thought that was great. I think that was great.
And I think it links very nicely with Charlotte's last comment about how this is a valuable opportunity to examine how people actually see and understand their locations at various periods, how they see locations across time. One more question.
So I have what I've been doing on the historic maps and digitizing is digitizing orchards. And we've done that for the National Trust actually on a national scale, and they're using this now in like an ecological way to maybe replace the location, because we found that actually like a really high percentage, something like 85% of small orchards have been destroyed since the 1900s, when this is the OS map that we've been digitizing, and that was compared to the data set that was created by the People's Trust for Endangered Species. So it's very much like an ecological point of view, but then helping them maybe on the National Trust side, where maybe they can replant some of these orchard trees so that they can bring blossom back, kind of. And it's been really fun, and that's we have the archaeology and the humanities side, but then there's more interest in historic maps from ecologists. And I think in some of the next projects we will be digitizing maybe like different woodland types and ponds, and so there's lots of potential for these maps and what we can extract from them with AI.
Definitely, we actually get more and more talks about collaboration with environmental scientists, and we're actually quite excited about that. And also, I mean, thank you for bringing up this example, because you are a perfect example of a type of things that people might want to look for on the map that wouldn't be in a, let's say, standardized, OpenStreetMap typology. Like, I want to see orchards. And this is what we want to achieve with the maps. We, one day, with the help of Yao-Yi and the computer scientists and Rainer and everyone else on the technical side, we want to enable people to say, I want to find all the mentions of orchards, even if they're not called orchards, on the OS maps.
Yeah, and we found also one of the things, like we were mapping where historic woodlands were, where the deciduous ones were, and where the coniferous ones were, because you could see them based on the different symbols that they were used.
Yeah,
but then actually we were looking at the mix of symbols, because there's often they're so overlapping that it's difficult to extract them from each other. And then we were thinking, there's often the type of woodland is actually described in the name, like this is a certain type of woodland, this is spruce, this is the spruce, or something like that, that really links to that. So the combination of having both the polygon detections and then the text detections can be super valuable in lots of these things.
So, no, thank you.
Yeah.
Actually, I have an inverse question for you. We're looking at symbolisms, but I worked early on in my career to make digital maps of historical, specifically Roman Britain, accessible to people who couldn't see. Would this technology be possible to associate, for example, sound symbols with specific historical features in the maps? Would the computer logic be good enough to say, okay, this is identified as a Roman fort, so we give it, I don't know, a trumpet sound. Or this is a Roman road, we get the sound of horses' hooves clopping along. Or this is an Iron Age fort, so we'll give somebody the sound of banging on a tin can or something. I don't know what particular sound symbols you would use. That would be a different semantic question, but could the technology be reversed to do that?
Well, that's a fascinating question. Thank you for asking it. So I'll give an initial answer, and whoever wants to jump in. So what I can say is that, I mean, if we are able to detect and recognize the text on the map, and we're able to make that searchable, that would definitely improve the accessibility of the map, of the digitized map, so that otherwise you're just raster images and you don't really know what is the text on it. How close are we to also associate symbols with sounds? I don't know, but that's a very interesting challenge. I don't know if Rainer or Katie want to add anything.
Because I could see that sort of technology being used for a variety of teaching components for people who can't see or who have learning disabilities, other sorts of learning disabilities, and that would allow them to explore these same maps in a totally different way. Because these maps contain, as you say, an immense amount of historical data. And what we're looking at here is as you say, semantic symbols. But symbols are more than just text and graphics. So it was just something that, listening to you, it crossed my mind as a question that.
Yeah, no, it is actually a very interesting one. And yeah, I think that you and Greta linked in the hyperspace, and basically almost has the same question. Do you guys in the call want to say something else about it?
Go ahead, Kitty.
I was going to say it's like really a creative idea that I certainly hadn't thought of. I love that. I love the way that it can open up the content, right, to people who might not have access to it, first of all. But I think for everyone, it can help you think differently. I write the kind of sonification of information as a way to think differently, analyze differently is really an exciting area. And I've never done that myself, but yeah, I think, I mean, just the example of the hoofs on the Roman road, it just made me think of how it could actually, it's a way of experiencing the landscape, right, potentially. And to try and do so in a historical manner would be kind of one step further. And thinking about how those sounds would change over time would be, I don't know, yeah, it's just got me thinking about all kinds of things. Sorry, Rainer.
Yeah, totally agreed. I mean, having being able to extract all the structured information from the map that's otherwise just an image opens up these possibilities, and I think it's an excellent idea in terms of the accessibility for visually impaired people. I'm pretty sure there would be more kind of use cases for that. Yeah, as you say, teaching or just building different kind of experiences around it, or exhibits or whatever. Yeah.
Okay, great. The super last.
El super last because we are over time.
Yes, Christopher Sperry Green. I should add that I'm a research fellow at University of Kent. I should give them a mention. Victoria County history, yes, very good idea. Yes, what that prompts from me is the Royal Commission volumes, because they have a lot of Ordnance Survey maps as part of the structure of each report. So there's
Royal Commission, you said.
Gosh, give the correct title of it now. The Royal Commission of Historical Monuments, England, and then there's one bracket Scotland. I
Okay.
think I've got that right. Yeah.
Gabi's writing that down.
Oh, yeah.
Great, wonderful.
It was a brilliant project that went on for decades in the post-war period, but then founded in about 1990 to 2000, unfortunately, because of the cost.
Wonderful, thank you for the suggestion. I think that it would be fair to close it now so that we can release the people online.
With this wonderful advice that we have noted, we end here. Thank you very much to everyone in the room. Thank you so much for coming, and anybody online, watching online, thank you so much. We will see you next Friday for our next session, which will be on learning ancient Greek in person through digital annotations. The week? No, next week, the 1st of July. Thank you, everybody, and see you next week.